Hello, everybody, and welcome to Getting APIs to Work. Today, we talk about API sprawl. And with us here is Jay Simpson, who's a writer at Nordic APIs. Hey, Jay, how are you doing?
Doing great, Eric. Good morning. How are you?
I'm feeling good, thanks. Yes, and thanks so much for joining, and thanks for talking about API sprawl. You recently published an article about API sprawl, which, of course, we will link to from the description. And I think it's a topic that a lot of people still find is very interesting and is increasingly sometimes affecting them. So let's briefly talk about what API sprawl even is. If you had to describe to somebody, you wrote that article on API sprawl. What is API sprawl? How would you go about explaining that to somebody?
API sprawl is basically, call it maybe two halves. It comes in two pieces, perhaps, which is the first and most obvious being it's just a rapid adoption and rise, like huge explosion of interest that APIs have been seeing in the last few years. And on the other side, on the more sort of technical infrastructure side, API sprawl is the APIs themselves, like sprawling, like spreading out, and so in a not very like coordinated or well thought out way.
Yeah, not being a native speaker myself, in my mind, it feels to me like API sprawl has negative connotations. The one that comes to mind as a word that people are using is urban sprawl. And I think whenever you talk about urban sprawl, it's also not something that people mean as a good thing. So if it has negative connotations, then walk us just very briefly through the disadvantages or the potential disadvantages that API sprawl can have if you see that happening in your organization.
So the urban sprawl is actually a pretty good analogy and like image to kind of hold in your mind, because it's similar to like what's happening with the APIs, which is it's sort of things being implemented in a not very well thought out way, which then results in all manner of headaches down the line for everybody. So the first, the most alarming is the security risks, and when things aren't being handled properly or handled by people that know what they're doing, then it puts your whole organization at risk. And I read about a thing last night that was a company lost $45 million, I believe, like via one improperly exposed API key in about 40 minutes. So,
Yep.
Yeah. So that's not great, obviously. So then from the technical side, or the more business, on the development side, it's just it's a really inefficient way to work. It's ends up with like a lot of just like wasted time and resources, and it ends up with like different development teams are like making the same APIs like over and over again, and then so that's like bad for business, but it's like it's bad for morale too. It's like nobody likes to feel like they're working on things that like could have been avoided or like aren't necessary.
I guess the duplication of effort, right? That's something that's really, and it's kind of clear probably that the more things you have, the more you could benefit from economies of scale if you found a way how to actually get to those economies of scale. And I think that's in the end a little bit where API sprawl also kicks off some of these activities, right? Where organizations are, like you say, they are seeing, oh, this API thing seems to be here to stay, and it seems to grow. So what do we do about it? And I think more and more organizations are at that point. And in your article, you were very specifically like giving some guidance on what people can do or what organizations can do to better manage API sprawl. And I really liked it. I would recommend everybody to read that article. But let's just briefly walk through those points that you were pointing out as a way to better manage API sprawl. So what are these 7 different steps? It sounds like there's 7 is always a good number, right? That people are using. It's like the 7 steps to whatever. So the 7 steps to better managing API sprawl. Give us your 7 steps, Jay.
Okay, so step number 1 is API governance, and just having sort of system and guidelines in place, on an enterprise level, like across the board, that for people to follow, just makes everything really clear. So API governance, step number 1.
Yep, that's a good one.
All right. Then number 2, a single source for API discovery is how I phrase that. So having a way to monitor and see what APIs you have, and so like an API catalog being my.
Yes, of course, I have to say, because I work for X-Way, and X-Way has something that we called for a while the unified catalog, and that's exactly, I think, what people should be having. And there are different ways how you can build it, but I think as a general, just as a pattern, it's definitely good guidance. Okay, thank you.
Yes. So step number 3 is like API management, and having an API management system in place. So, and then, which is almost similar to API governance in a way, I suppose, but just having helps you having your APIs discoverable, governable, manageable, and observable. So step number 4 is proper API versioning and documentation. So make sure that you version things properly, and you deprecate things properly, and then make sure that each of your versions is thoroughly and appropriately documented as well, which will do it a lot, because
there's probably something that some people might call like API product management, or these kind of things, right? Just like making sure that you can evolve those things, or you can end of life them, right? These kind of things, and that seems like something that helps. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So step number 5 is track API metrics, which is highly recommended, and I don't even, I would say probably essential. I mean, probably all these are, but keeping track, because that's how you can see when things aren't going right, and you can, because you can see what everything is doing and where everything is going, and so if a particular endpoint is getting an unusually a large amount of traffic, calls, then that's something. Yeah, exactly.
Could be a good thing, but also could be a bad thing. So
yeah. Oh, and a quick follow-up thought on that is make sure to do that over time as well, because sometimes these trends can, aren't immediately obvious. So. This is fairly obvious. So step number 6 is just proper API security, but across your entire enterprise. So that's an important thing, and especially for people that are less newer to APIs and stuff, is make sure that you, because sometimes people leave things exposed internally, they leave that and it gets you it's or even demo APIs or test APIs. Things aren't. So so putting some sort of fail safes in place across all of your your various and then step number 7, which is something that you just that you just alluded to, which is make sure to kill your APIs properly. Someone put it hold the proper funeral for your but but make sure that yes, so decommission them properly and thoroughly, like, because that's how you end up with zombie APIs and such, if you don't. So
right, the zombies and the shadow APIs, like all those scary words that people are passing around.
yeah, they love those. It's so evocative.
Yes.
So yeah, so having those, like, even just those, it's like 7 simple steps. It's a pretty like quick checklist kind of guideline. It'll save you a lot of headache and a lot of pain and trouble, even if you just kind of go down the checklist. And
yeah, I think it's a good starting point, to just look at, are we doing all of this? If not, maybe we should invest into this. And I think pretty much in every organization, right, we will see that APIs will be growing over time. Whether we call it sprawl or growth is a matter of taste, maybe, but it's definitely going to be something that you will have to manage. Right? And I think your 7 points there are really it's a good starting point. Okay, Jay, thank you so much for walking us through this list. I think it's going to be helpful for a lot of people. We'll link all the resources that you've made available. You've also used a white paper, I think, that you said you liked a lot from F5.
I did.
We'll also link to that from the description. So if people want to learn more, there's a pretty detailed white paper on API Sprawl from F5. And Jay, thanks again for joining. It was a lot of fun. I hope people found it interesting, and thanks for giving us your insights.
Thanks so much, Eric. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, and thanks everybody for watching. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and until next time, keep getting APIs to work. Bye, everybody.